Working. All right, let's go.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time on your Wednesday lunch breaks to hang out with us for just a little bit. Taking time out to be intentional for your business. That's what this webinar series has been all about from the very beginning. And we've had so many awesome speakers throughout the year. Every Wednesday, we're just hanging out, having conversations about how to grow your business, think about your responsibilities a little bit different, and obviously investing in your mental health as we are today. If you didn't know, here at the SBDC, we provide free one-on-one consultations for you and your business for the life of your business, which means we're here to help you all the way until you're ready to exit and sell or make that next step in your life. As such, one of our advisors is Rebecca Hawkins, and we brought her on very intentionally to make sure that you are finding balance with yourself, balance with your team, and creating a really great culture within your organization. And so this webinar series really helps marry into that idea very well. And Rebecca's done such an awesome job getting different speakers throughout the year. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for all you do. If
Thanks.
I can turn it over to you to introduce our speaker for today. But just so everybody knows, all you have to do is go to our website, pikespeaksbdc.org, and you get to sign up for a session with Rebecca anytime you need. All right, take it away, Rebecca.
Thanks, Brandon. I love our small business community. I love the amount of expertise and wisdom we have in this community around well-being, taking care of ourselves, and being able to bring in these great speakers. As Brendan said, I offer free consulting through the SBDC for you to talk through what drains your energy and how you can prioritize yourself and take better care of yourself as a business owner, as well as how we can create cultures that don't burn out our employees, that make employees and help employees to thrive. So that's what I offer. And part of what I get to do here at the SBDC is this monthly Wellbeing Wednesday series. It's the fourth Wednesday of every month at noon. I'm so excited to be here. I am going to kick it over here in a sec to our today's speaker, but I also would love it if you would take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. So just drop in the chat really quick your name. Well, your name's there, but if it's not, because some people dial in with a phone number or something, if you can, your business, like what is the business that you're running and what stage of business are you at right now? Are you just in the idea stage? Have you been running it for a while? Do you have a ton of employees or is it just you? So just the name and stage of your business. And if you're not in Colorado Springs in the Pikes Peak area, let us know where you're dialing in from as well. This webinar is open to anyone, anywhere. So we sometimes get people coming in from Boulder or Pueblo. We're just glad you're here. So introduce yourself in the chat. And as you're doing that, I'm going to introduce Nicole Weis, who is from the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience at our very own UCCS campus. She is an expert in so many different ways on human thriving and has many different programs that the Lyda Hill Institute offers as well. And I'm so grateful to know her and know that she's a resource in our community and to have her here to deliver this really important talk on burnout and self-preservation. Because as I say in my business as well, we can't give what we don't have. So as business owners, we have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our customers and our employees. So with that, I am going to kick it off to Nicole. And thank you all for introducing yourselves in the chat. We're so glad you're all here.
Thank you all so very, very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which I think Rebecca just says it's going to turn off your sound. So I just want to
That's
make sure
fine.
that.
Please do that.
Okay.
Yes. I should have done that first.
No, that's okay. Was just a little hesitant. Okay. So I think everybody should see my screen now. I'm also going to pull up the chat because I love interaction and dialogue. And so if you have any questions, even in the middle of my presentation, like let's pause, let's talk, let's chat. I love, love, love that. So thank you everybody for having me today. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I know we run into each other in so many wonderful spaces. And so I was such a privilege to be invited into this. So my name is Nicole Weis. I am the co-executive director of the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience, which is at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. I'm also a licensed professional counselor and a licensed addictions counselor. And I love this work. I love getting to talk about what does it mean to feel stress? What does it do to our body? But then very, very, very importantly, what do we do with all of those experiences? So again, very happy to be here. What I want to talk about today is burnout, which is such a buzzword, especially I think in leadership and organizational stress and or organizational situations. I think we're talking about burnout more than we've ever talked about before, and for really, really good reasons. I think we are feeling more burnout than maybe we've ever felt before. But I think also most importantly, we are willing to talk about it and we are willing to do something about it. So I really want to talk about that in the lens of leadership and kind of give you a different frame to think about self-care and think about resilience. So please come with me on this journey here. So as I talk today, I always like to really start with this discussion of layers of stress that we experience. As everyday average humans, we are designed to feel stress. We actually do optimally, we do our best when we feel some level of stress. We're going to get a little bit more into that. But as you think about kind of these layers, and I like this kind of crust of the earth, core of the earth example, everybody feels general stress. We are designed to. And similar to how we see the crust of the earth, we also have kind of obvious signs when we are feeling stressed. So I'm going to invite you in the chat. And if you're watching this, recording later, think about this. But just in the last 72 hours, knowing I'm not wearing my therapist hat right now, what are some things that have caused you stress? And how have you exhibited that stress? I know for me, there's my kiddo just started kindergarten for the very first time this month. I am part of campus, and so semester started this month. So there's been this like August has been insane when I thought it would be calm, and so my stress lately has just been like the ever constant changing of this past month. And I've shown that by getting like I get like this funny energy where I like focus really hard on some things while completely neglecting other things. And that's how I know I'm feeling stressed. So I just want to invite you to kind of think about that. Somebody just chimed in here, timing, scheduling, being the only one, right? You're the one that everybody goes to, and that is taxing. So what are you doing? You meditate, you cry in the morning. I think cry is an absolute amazing release. I could talk all day about the power of getting your emotions out. So that's a good one. My adult son's mental health is a really another good example of things that cause us stress. And then somebody else, health issues, exhibited it by talking about it in the moment. Family member issues. This is a big one. Family work balance, big ones. What often causes us stress contain three variables. Most often, they feel negative. Not always, because we love our kids. I mean, I'm sure you love your family. We love our work. So there's so many positive pieces that come with it. And there also tends to be some negativity attached to it. What more overwhelmingly also happens for those things that cause us stress is that they tend to have a level of uncontrollability and unpredictability. And those two things in particular cause us as a species to get a little stressed out. We like to live in a very predictable, known world. When that's out of balance or out of homeostasis, we feel a little stress. As I mentioned, our body's designed to do that for so long. What happens when we feel the stress on a chronic basis is our body starts to kind of do damage. The exact same mechanisms that help us perform in stress start to damage us as that stress prolongs. And that's where we get into that second layer of chronic stress. We also have this fascinating experience as humans of an experience called secondary traumatic stress, also called vicarious trauma. And this happens when we hear hard stories. And oftentimes in our work, we can hear hard stories. I'm looking at the doula here, the pregnancy doula, and even in massage. How often do you bear witness to hard stories, hard experiences? What happens is our beautiful brain absorbs those experiences, and we can start to develop things like post-trauma stress from those experiences, which is fascinating. And then we have this last layer of trauma, which is where we ourselves would experience something we would consider traumatic or significantly stressful. And I like to think of it in these, again, core crust of the earth layers, because while all of us feel general stress, and many of us feel chronic stress, and some of us feel secondary traumatic stress, another portion of the population feels all four at any given time. So when we think about how we communicate and how we kind of love one another, this is a really important kind of characteristics to remember, right? Is that we're all feeling this, and many of us are feeling several layers of this. So how do we react to stress? This is probably one of my top two favorite things to talk about. And I invite you to go on a quick little visualization with me. I invite you to imagine that you were driving into your office this morning, or you're headed into, some errand, and somebody or, wherever you're headed calls you or texts you or sends you an email that says, "Hey, everything is good and grand and golden, but let's cancel the day." Like you suddenly have this free day. And it's a day like this. And so you're like, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to enjoy the outside. I'm going to go for a walk in the forest. And so let's say you head up to Divide or Manitou or wherever the mountains is for you. And you get out of the car and you just start hiking and it's beautiful and you can hear the gravel and the birds and the breeze and you're totally in the forest. And as you move through the forest, you turn a corner, bam, there's this grizzly bear. And I don't know why there's a grizzly bear where your forest is, but let's say it's there. And as you're staring at this grizzly bear rears up and you hear squeak, squeaks, baby bears behind you. So in a sense, you just walked in between mama bear, baby bears. In that split second, your brain is going to decide how it thinks you should survive. And I want to emphasize that your brain overrides, right? Your brain just says, we got to survive. This is how we're doing it. What tends to happen is that we tend to fall into one of six kind of categories of response. We could fly away from the situation, which means we would retreat. We could fight the situation, which means in some way we will try to make ourselves be bigger than the threat facing us. We could freeze, in which our brain and body are kind of shut down. And a more extreme response is flop, where we literally just kind of fall to the ground, we give up. Or we could fawn, which is a really fascinating human experience. Some other mammals do this too, where we try to make the threat feel better in an effort and a hope that the threat will leave us alone. And then we also have a flock response, which is a reminder that we are a social co-regulating species. We like to be with groups, we like to have community, we thrive when we're with community, and we tend to respond with the community, which means that if we were hiking with a group of people and most of them took off running, we would be inclined to follow and take off running as well, even if a different part of our brain goes, "Ooh, I'm pretty sure you should fight," or "I'm pretty sure you should freeze," whatever that might be. We tend to go with the crowd. Now, a couple of situations where this might be a little bit different is if you're hiking in the forest with your kids and then you come across a bear, right? Our impulse will then be usually to protect. I will step in front of the vulnerable to protect, even if it means I sacrifice a bit of myself. Where this comes up in leadership is we might sacrifice ourselves, we might work extra hours, we might take on extra tasks in the hope that somebody else's stress will be lower. And then we also have this fascinating experience where we can activate this stress response over a real threat that's in front of us, like this bear, or an imagined threat we think is coming. So if you, for instance, if you're hiking through the forest and a park ranger comes down the trail and says, "Hey, there's a bear 10 feet away," we are going to prepare to see that bear. And that happens a lot in our everyday world too, where we are feeling the stress off of something we are creating in our mind. And I want to validate the fact that that feels just as real. And it's not as tangible as this bear in front of us. So we tend to fall into these six responses, and they can look a little different. And not many of us are actually coming across bears on any given day. So, what we do encounter is what I like to think of as modern bears, which result in modern responses. So, modern bears often feel like our work pressure, or if we have to meet a certain grant or budget or performance metric. As we react to the policies around us and government and political changes, as we become overloaded with information, when our goals are mismatched, when we have health concerns, when it's our family health concerns, and then again, importantly, anything that often contains the lack of control or ambiguity in the unknown. And then our reactions don't always seem as obvious as what we would do with a bear. So, for instance, if let's say that you just found out you didn't get this big grant that you were working on. Very rarely do we read that email, drop our phone, and run away, right? Which would be like that fight response. But what we might do is read that email and then go, "Oh, I just need to like zone out for a while." Or I'm just gonna, you know what, I'm just gonna leave the office and I'm gonna go do something completely different for a little while. And that's that avoidance or escapism. So that's still a flight response. We might get frustrated or mad or argue instead. We might overreact, which is a bit of a fight response. We could, there again, zone out, shut down, veg out, give up entirely. Like, "Oh, I didn't get that. I'm just not gonna do this entirely." We could take on more. We could overcommit. We could try to constantly seek out reassurance from other people. So we still see these six responses in very modern ways. So my quick little challenge to you as we think through the next couple of slides too is to think about how are you responding to stress? And if you lead any kind of team, how does your team respond? And that team might be your family. How does your family respond to stress? right? How do you work together as a unit? Again, whether that's within an organization, within a community, within a family. But when we're all reacting to stress, what's going on for us? And this is important because this is why we tend to get into chronic stress, is when we are all reacting to stress and we're kind of living in it. And as I mentioned, what starts to happen is our body kind of breaks down from it. It wasn't designed to do that, right? We aren't designed to constantly react to bears. And yet, in our very modern world, we often do exactly that. So what happens is we start to experience the physical consequences of prolonged stress, which looks like loss of insulin. Anybody feel just constantly tired? No matter how much sleep you get, you are just waking up exhausted, right? Or no matter how much you exercise and eat healthy and whatever, you're still holding on to those pockets of like weight that you want to get rid of. Sometimes our body just doesn't let us because it's living in a stress response. It could be suspension of tissue repair, which just means our body gets achy, pains, right? Inhibition of the immune system. How often have you, worked several weeks straight, taken a vacation, and got sick the next day, right? We see a lot of that reaction when we're living in stress. Changes to lung, excess epinephrine, we start to see an increase in anxiety and heart palpitations. We also see this behaviorally where we can kind of get more negative, or we start to emotionally detach. We start to kind of push away from people or withdraw. We're not as efficient. We start to look for early retirement. What's the end game for me? Or we start to get into ineffective coping skills, right? So this is all to say we start to see these consequences when we don't deal with them. I should have said I might bum you out a little bit, but I hope to lift you up towards the end here. What also happens, again, when we think about what's going on in an organization or a community, and again, that might be even your family or your outside community, what we start to see is things like resignation and turnover, right? We start to see an increased workload, usually attached to that resignation and turnover. We see communication breakdown. We're all getting like a little snippy with each other when we're all feeling stressed. We can also see a resistance to change. When we're constantly working through change, our brain at some point goes, oh my gosh, enough, right? I don't want to keep changing. And so we start to get this resistance. We can see burnout, which we're going to come back to. And we can also see what I think of as compounding stressors. And what I think of with that is everybody's stressed around some things. Again, that's our modern life. And for some of us, we're holding on to work stress and family stress and our pets and our finances and the political government and, the environmental stress and our finances and all of that we're juggling at all times. And eventually that gets just exhausting, right? And that can kind of come back to all of these pieces. So one of the things, as I mentioned, that we often experience is this idea of burnout. Just very simply, I am exhausted. What it often looks like is this feeling of being constantly swamped, constantly or feeling a prolonged level of emotional, physical, and mental stress. We often relate burnout to the workplace, but hopefully we don't live, I mean, some of you might, but we don't live at work, in the fact that there's usually a level of separation. And sometimes it's actually home that's burning us out. So I always just like to validate and kind of normalize that fact. If we can talk about burnout from work all day long, and you're also this whole person who's experiencing potentially stress and burnout from other levels of life as well. Burnout is related to stress in the fact that the things that cause us stress can lead to burnout. However, they're separate because stress is temporary or it's situational. Even when it doesn't feel like it, eventually this thing that's causing me stress will probably be over. It might not cause me stress forever. Burnout tends to be much more encompassing, and I can't always identify the thing that's burning me out. It's often a lot of pieces that are all coming in together. And while there's things that I can do to resolve my stress, I have to take really active steps to resolve the burnout because it's just bigger than that. I want to pause here and just see the comment that just came in. This is actually a part of it for me that I'm trying to understand better. I am definitely a live to work and not a work to live person. And I do generally feel good when I'm able to give a lot to my job. It's challenging to find the tipping point when it moves from passion and energy to overextension and burnout. So I so appreciate that comment. And I want you to hold on to it as we get into like the lift you up part, because we maybe come back to that with a new reframe. Thank you. So thinking about stress and burnout, I also want to point out that we have this really fascinating cultural experience around burnout, which is that we tend to be on one of two ends of a spectrum. We tend to feel like I'm not doing my job well enough if I am burned out, or I'm not doing my job well enough if I'm not burned out. Like we have this really high performance expectation, especially in our culture, to say that you have to work to the bone to make sure you're making that difference, right? Or, yeah, you should be going 60 hours. You shouldn't be sleeping. You shouldn't, we have all these heavy expectations on ourselves. And I think that's even more true for entrepreneurs who we have the mentality of I have to make it done. And as somebody pointed out, sometimes it's just me, right? And so who else is going to do it except me, right? And so oftentimes that ends up coming in hand with burnout. Now, some of the experiences we often see with burnout include things like declining motivation. Like it's just harder and harder to do the things that I'm excited about, even though I'm excited about it. We start to see reduced productivity. What I am able to get done at the end of the day is starting to get a little bit shorter and shorter. Increased cynicism, social withdrawal, which is always fascinating for me. Lack of attention to detail, like things just become good enough. Like fine, it's fine as long as it gets me through the day. And then we start to see physical complaints, including headaches, fatigue, and body aches, because our body's still going through a stress response. So levels of burnout can shift and vary kind of based on what's going on in the day to day and the environment. And they do still tend to have some of these clusters of experiences. If you've ever been curious if you're burned out, there's this QR code here. This QR code contains two surveys. One is called the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory, and it's like a scale of I think 64, I think is the highest score you could get. And it'll kind of take you through different experiences of burnout. And the higher the score, the higher the level of burnout you might be experiencing. The second survey on there is called the Coping Self-Efficacy for Burnout Survey. And it says, how well do you feel like you're able to cope with the burnout that you might be experiencing? So this is a completely anonymous survey. This is just if you, for your own curiosity, nobody checks these results. They don't get sent to anything or anyone. And if you wanted to take it, just if you're curious, I'm a big scales person. I like to kind of see where I'm at. Higher the score, higher those results. So first one, higher the burnout. Second one, higher the self-efficacy, which means even when I feel burned out, I feel capable. Um, I thought I had one more. Okay, so I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna back my brain up. So a lot of different ways that we can experience that stress, a lot of different ways it can manifest. And again, I just want to point out that we are complex individuals. And so we feel these in layers, we feel these in different experiences, and we can experience a lot at one time. Now, a model that I really, really love, especially in leadership, is called the stress injury continuum. And what this allows us to do is talk about stress and in trauma, even we're not going to get super into the trauma piece, but it allows us to talk about the experiences of stress as a spectrum, as a continuum of experiences in a similar way that we talk about physical experiences. So in this picture, you can see kind of like the strained ankle. If you're a runner, you're running at any given time, and you step off a curb and you feel this like, you hear this like pop, and you feel this like quick little shoot of pain up your ankle. What that is an early changing vital sign. It says, oops, I did something, something has changed, something has shifted. Now, I'm an autonomous person, right? Which means I have the choice of what to do with that experience. I could honor it. I could stop, I could walk, I could rest, I could ice, I could elevate, I could go see a PT, I could go get a massage, all sorts of things I could do to treat this vital sign. I could ignore it. And I'm willing to bet a lot of us in here would ignore it because we would be like, it's fine. I'll walk it off. Let me see how it feels tomorrow. I have too much to do. But I still got to get down the block, right? I can keep going even though this hurts. And what happens is we might do that and it might start to hurt a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it might be that one day we wake up and our ankle is like, and swollen and red. And now we kind of don't have a choice. We have to get help for this because I can't walk on it at this point. So mental health, exact same trajectory of events, right? It's just the way we think about it and talk about it might be different. So let's think about, you are really stressed out, you're feeling all of these, stressors, and maybe you're edging on that burnout. And you wake up one day and you realize, oh my God, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go do this thing that I'm usually so excited about. I don't want to talk to anybody. I feel exhausted. That is a changing vital sign. That says, hey, something has shifted. Something's changed. Something's wrong. And so if we pull ourselves back and we say, okay, how do I treat that? Right? Then all sorts of options open up to us. Or what many of us tend to do is say, okay, it's just a Monday. Let me just get through it. Let me just go through this one day. Next week will be better. Eventually things will slow down. And we ignore it. And the more and more and more that happens, the more susceptible we are that one day we wake up and we say, this isn't worth it for me anymore. Or, wow, I lost all my passion for this. It's gone, right? Because now I'm injured. Now this hurts. So I just invite you to think about stress as an injury because it is, right? None of us are floating heads. We are all connected into our physical body. And so thinking about how do I treat my physical body, which unfortunately tends to be with more care than we treat our mental experiences, and it's all the same system. So this stress injury continuum is a model that was originally developed by the military, and it allowed them to do that. It allowed them to say, hey, what's going on in my squad? What's going on in this individual that's changing? And how do I honor that and support that? It helps them treat experiences as they happen, as we recognize them. And it's an acknowledgement that if I don't take care of this, it could get worse. Now, maybe not always. Sometimes we do walk it off and it gets better, but sometimes it doesn't. And if I can catch it then, I'm preventing so many more injuries down the road. So this is a model of the stress injury continuum. I love this model. Feel free to share it and use it. Um, this is called just a well-being rubric, but it's based off of the original stress injury continuum that was developed by the military. What this says is that everybody is on a spectrum of stress experiences. And maybe in our life, we are thriving, where work feels so balanced. I am in a flow. I am engaged in meaningful work. I feel connected to this bigger purpose. I'm excited. I'm positive. I'm thriving. Right? This is amazing. And I like to kind of tongue in cheek call thriving and healthy striving like magical unicorn land. And if you're there, amazing, be there. I'd love to be there. And sometimes we're not there. So I just want to normalize that out. Healthy striving would be that, like, yeah, I'm feeling some stress, but still feel very productive. My work is still meaningful. While the workload is getting high, I still feel confident. I find flow. These two, blue, green, beautiful spaces to be in. Life is hard. And so many of us are surviving. And I just want to normalize that that's okay. And that's when we feel like things are getting hectic. I'm still coping well, but it's starting to feel a little bit short term, right? I have my goals in mind, but again, maybe I'm not making as much progress as I want to be. My performance is productive, but I could be doing a little bit better. So surviving is just very normal, especially in just the high stress life we tend to live in. And then we could be struggling. And this is land of burnout for me, because this is often what burnout starts to feel like, where I'm stressed. I'm technically functioning, but this is hard. And my workload is starting to feel too high. I don't know when I'm going to get it done. I don't know when the next week that I'm not crazy busy is going to be, right? My performance is starting to get more inconsistent. I'm making more mistakes. I'm just not who I signed up to be right now, right? So I'm struggling. And then we could be drowning, right? Where I'm here today, but I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I am stressed. I'm not functioning. I've lost sight of my goals. I see nothing but problems, right? I feel really just negative emotions. I'm making careless mistakes. And so drowning I'm kind of approaching crisis, right? Like I'm not only burned out, I'm flaming out, right? This is hard. So, what I love about the spectrum is that everybody's on it, right? It is Wednesday afternoon. And so, thinking about where you are Wednesday afternoon, maybe you're surviving today. Maybe the work week has gotten a little harder and you're more struggling. Whereas Monday, when you started off like fresh outlook, you were in thriving or healthy striving. You could be one color in one space and a whole other color in another space, right? I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. They're tough right now, right? And we're just started kindergarten and all this chaos at home. So like healthy, like at work where I feel like I thrive, I'm like green, I'm good. And sometimes when I come home at 5:30 and I'm met with like the chaos, I'm like, oh, I'm a little yellow orange in this space because this space is a little harder for me. And maybe that's reverse. But everybody's on it. So I invite three questions for you, and I think I have them on here. I invite three questions. One, Four questions. One is, what does each color look like for you? Because your healthy striving might be my surviving, and my surviving might be your struggling, right? Where is it for you? What does each of those colors look like for you? So I do invite a little bit of like leadership journaling here or a little bit of self-reflection. What would that mean for you to be thriving? What would it mean for you to be drowning? And then kind of the three big questions is, where are you just today? And maybe what needs to shift, or how do you acknowledge that? And then importantly for leaders, and for entrepreneurs and for organizations, where's your team? And again, your team might be your family, your team might be your community, but where's your team? If you're healthy striving, everybody around you is struggling, you're going to get pulled into that space. Co-regulating species is what we do. The opposite is true. If we're struggling, but my community is thriving, I'm going to get pulled into that space, right? And so it's a really great question to think about, where am I flowing and where's the space around me? And then how would you know something's changed? So we've heard this analogy, maybe you've heard this, of like a frog in boiling water, that if you put a frog in boiling water, they jump out. I actually heard this analogy is not true anymore, but I'm going to keep going with it because it fits the example. But you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out, right? Because it's too hot, too fast. If you put a frog in slowly boiling water, they don't know the difference. Similar to us, if we continue to ignore the little things and they continue to build, we kind of stop taking so much notice of the little things versus if it's, rough right from the get-go. So I like this question of, how would you know something's changed? If you are struggling, what do you need to do to get to surviving? What would need to change to get you to surviving? And if you're struggling, what would happen to get you to drowning? Because that's a very important thing to know for yourself. So there's my quick little, self-reflection invitation for you, is to really think about, how would you apply this for your life, your organization, your community? Now, what do we do about that? So here's our lift up, right? So you're all bummed out. You're like, great, Nicole, I'm great. I'm so glad I joined into this. I feel super great about myself. Let's talk about what you do about it. First step is check your battery. So many of us have our phones around at any given time. We might kind of glance at our battery. Mine's at 90%. If it's low, I might be like, ooh, why is it low? What's going on? Have I used it too much? Is there an app that's draining it? Am I at the end of my day? What's going on? We don't often do that for our own kind of internal mental health battery. So you might ask yourself, how is my mental battery at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And I like this question because if you're like, ooh, I'm at like 10% left, I don't got much left. And then you have to go home and you want to be with your family and your friends and your pets and all of that, but you only have 10% battery left to give, that's not fair. So what do you need to do to kind of pay attention to that throughout the day? So what's going on around me, what's going on within me that might be draining my battery? And then you can ask yourself some questions. You can say, is there something I can do to change my situation or my circumstance? So I like this, again, phone battery analogy, because I have baby monitor still on my phone, and my baby monitor will drain my battery. And so sometimes I do glance and I'm like, ooh, why am I at 40% at 11 o'clock in the morning? Oh, it's because I left my baby monitor on. So in a similar sense with emotions and mental health, what can you do to change, to shift out of that? Maybe it's that, like, I just need to finish this grant proposal. Maybe it's I need to talk to my colleagues so that we can come to a better understanding. Maybe it's like, "Oh, I just need to get out of this house for a little bit. What can I do to change it?" Sometimes we can't change it. Sometimes that's reality. So then what control do I have that it won't make such an impact, that it won't drain me so much? Again, can I talk about it with somebody? Can I kind of do a priority list and reframe it, whatever that might be? But what control do I have? And then lastly, what things can I do within my day that, in a sense, plug me back in, right? How do I refuel my battery or give me a sense of relief? And I love caffeine, but it can't always be caffeine. What else can I do to recharge some of that mental space for me? And what this really comes down into is asking, what is in my control? So again, let's go all the way back to the bear. One of the things that causes bears for us is a level of uncontrollability. So let's take it back. What do I have control over in this chaotic day that I feel is in my capability? And that shifts us automatically out of that overwhelmed brain space into something that feels more control, takes away the bear. So what's in your control? Second step, this is my second favorite thing to think about and talk about. I invite you to redefine self-care. So you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious how many people on the call And you please feel free to answer it if you want to. But how many people in this meeting right now or listening online later, how many of you hear the word self-care and a little part of you, maybe a bigger part of you, rolls your eyes or says, yeah, that's great when I have time. When will I have time? Right? Or yeah, that sounds great. But I can't afford that. I can't do a massage. I can't take the time away. I can't give my work to somebody else. Right? So we have this tendency to think about self-care as this kind of like fluffy idea of like, yeah, it sounds great when eventually, right? And I'm so glad when you're already shifting the mindset. And some of us still are in that, right? So super quick tangent, making sure I'm on time, but super quick is I was doing a training similar to this with a group of healthcare workers in like 2021. So thick of COVID, right? And I started to talk about self-care, and this one beautiful lady stood up and said, I will walk out of this room if you talk to me about self-care because I've heard it too much. And it just feels like one more thing that now I have to do, now I have to figure out. And I thought, what a beautiful challenge. And so I took it back to my team, and we really thought about this of how do we emphasize the need for self-care because it is so important for us without it feeling like one more thing, right? So here's my invitation if your eyes rolled back a little bit with the word self-care. I would invite you to think about the idea of self-preservation. So instead of taking care of yourself, how do you preserve yourself? Which is a little bit of a different mind frame to have. And I just love the comment that just came in. You are stuck with yourself forever, so you should take care of you. Because you're right. So how do you preserve you? When I think about burnout, I think of a loss of preservation. What the unfortunate reality with burnout is very often it comes with a loss of passion. And for entrepreneurs and leaders and organizational, heads, that's a bummer, right? Because I got into this for a reason. I think about I used to work in crisis and I loved that work. And for a while, I rode along with police and fire and I loved that work. And then one day I found that I didn't love the work. And for me, it was the whole boiling water. It happened before I even realized it had happened. And that was such a disappointment for me. And so the idea of instead of how do I take care of myself when the symptoms flare? How do I take care of the ankle when the ankle hurts? How do I preserve the ankle so it doesn't have to hurt to begin with? And that's a different mind frame to take. So there's my invitation for you. So here's some questions to ask yourself. How are you preserving who you are? And importantly, how are you preserving who you want to be? How are you preserving the person who wanted to start the business? How are you preserving the entrepreneurial spirit that got you excited in the first place? Because when we get into burnout, we're losing those pieces. So let's shift that before we ever enter that territory and say, how do I preserve that excitement, that passion, that person? Another way to think about this is, again, I don't want to treat the ankle after the ankle's already hurt, but can I warm up and can I cool down so that I don't even hurt the ankle? So I love this example. My husband was a federal corrections officer. He worked in the penitentiary of a prison, very, very, very hard place to be in. And he would be in there from anywhere from 8 to 16 hours a day when he worked. And so we purposely bought a house an entire hour away so that he had a whole hour to literally warm up to the idea of being in this highly stressful space. And then he had an hour to cool down after. And I've always really stuck with that idea. When I know I'm facing a stressful day, how could I take 5 minutes to kind of warm up to the idea that this might be a stressful day, right? Can I like pump myself up with some music? Can I go treat myself to like the really bougie coffee because I know it's going to make me happy? Can I do something like play a mindfulness, track in the middle of my day? How am I warming up to this? And or, preferably and, but sometimes it's or, how do I cool down when I like, oh, that was a really hard day. That was a really hard conversation. How do I then take care of myself? I love this because it goes back to the stress injury continuum. What's your plan to get to green? If you are an orange today, go get yourself that bougie coffee and then write it down. How am I going to get to green? What do I need to do to shift out of what's going on for me right now? Do I need to ask for help? Do I need to get a mentor? Hey, Rebecca, right? Do I need to like get some support so that it doesn't feel like I'm doing this all on my own? Maybe it's that. Maybe it's, hey, can I make a plan with my family to say, hey, on Monday through Thursday, this is my family plan. Monday through Thursday, I don't cook dinner. Husband cooks dinner so that that's not one more thing on my plate, right? So how do I shift some of these pieces so that I have a plan to get there? And the goal should always be that we're getting towards green. Order dinner. Yes. Oh my God. Ordering groceries has been life-changing for me, by the way. It's one less thing that I have to figure out. So sometimes it's those little things that can really, really help. And I also want to emphasize that sometimes it's the season of life that we're in, right? So for this season of life, how can I make it a little easier for myself? How can I take one more task off myself? Or how can I get support during this tough season so that I can shift? And then, very, very importantly, I want to remind everyone that you are profoundly human. So, how do you honor yourself in this whole process? Okay, a couple more minutes before we get to some questions. I want to touch in on what does this mean for leadership? If you are a leader, and again, you might be leader in family, community, organization, asking yourself when we are all feeling stress, what's the bear? What are we reacting to? Why are we feeling stress? Where's the bear in this situation? Is the bear, again, a grant? Is the bear the building? Is the bear my kindergartner starting kindergarten, right? What's the bear? And maybe there's multiple bears. And so are there bears that we can deal with? How are we responding to stress both individually and collectively? We are co-regulating species. We are going to react with one another. So how are we doing that together? And are there ways that we collectively can shift? And almost always it comes down to what is in my control right now. When we are facing a couple of specific situations, there's also some tools we can do. So if you are leading through change, and change can be all sorts of things, I advise you that one of the biggest things you can do is have a plan in place. What was fascinating about the COVID-19 pandemic when it came to organizational resilience is many, many, many places did not have a plan for what happens if suddenly no one can access the office, right? And we often think about that, but we don't often make the plan for that. So plan it. What happens if your building shuts down? What happens if your house floods? What happens if your Wi-Fi's out? What's your plan, right? And so think about several of those different kind of scenarios and make physical plans, write it out, type it up. What will you do? My biggest advice as any kind of leader is communicate and be transparent whenever you can be transparent. So communicate your plan, acknowledge what you don't know, because sometimes that is the reality. I don't know what we're going to do. I can tell you I'm working on it, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking away the unknown bears from somebody else. Especially if you're a leader, somebody is going to look to you and say, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know yet, but I do want you to know I'm thinking about it. Right? Great. Then you can trust that I am doing that, hopefully. So communicate, acknowledge what you don't know. Invite feedback and participation. Again, especially if you're a leader in any kind of realm, what's working, what's not working. And remember that hopefully it's constructive feedback. We tend to take things really personal. When it comes to what can we do as leaders, it's not personal. What can we do as leaders so that the whole group feels trust? And then invite that participation. Be realistic about the pace of change. Again, this was a big lesson learned in COVID-19 that a lot of leaders had the expectation that, great, my workforce will just work from home. Okay, except what if they don't have computer? What if they don't have Wi-Fi? What if they don't have a space at home? What if they are also dealing with 9 different kids at home? What happens when the plan of we'll just work from home doesn't work? Can we be a little bit more realistic? Can we let go of different requirements that somebody else can make this happen? Check in often. What's working? What's not working? And then, especially if you're a leader, model self-preservation. Your team should know what some of your self-preservation and boundaries are. I think I've met it. One of my very favorite examples of my own leader, back when I've worked with my co-leader for 13 years now. 12 years ago, I remember being in a meeting with him, and I remember having, I think it was a student at the time, I remember having this dialogue, and his daughter called. And he said, hold on one sec, my daughter's calling. And this man will always answer the phone for his daughter. No questions asked. If she needs him, he will answer the phone. Now, he might say, like, hey, honey, I gotta go, right? But he will always answer the phone for her. What that did is it taught me that I am always allowed to prioritize my family. And that's never been a question since. Right. And so that was a boundary for him. I am here present, but if my daughter calls, I got to answer that call. Right. And so you think about as a leader, what are your boundaries? And by doing so, you give permission to other people to have boundaries as well. And that is very, very, very powerful. One of my other favorite stories I've heard is this leader, this CEO, who found that if he was in the office, everybody in the office would stay until he left. So if it was like 5 o'clock when the office closed, but he was still in his office, everyone would stay. And he started to realize, well, nobody's leaving until I leave. I have to kind of give them permission behaviorally to say you can leave now. So what he would start to do is at 4:45, 4:50, he would make this big production of leaving the office. He would, close his computer, he would pack up his briefcase, he would get his jacket, he would walk out the door, he would say, "Goodbye, everybody, I'll see you in the morning," and he would make this production of leaving. He was giving permission for everybody else to say, "It's 5, leave," right? Now, what I don't agree with the story is that he would then go to his car and he would work from his car. I don't think that's doing enough. But what he was doing is showing everybody you have permission to do this. And so, again, if you are in any kind of leadership position, what are you giving permission to, not just verbally, behaviorally as well? So, when we think about change, how do you prepare your team for some of that change? And then sometimes it's the unknown. Like, I don't know what's happening next. I don't know if we're going to get this grant. I don't know if we're going to do this next step, but this is what we're facing. So, similar, but other things you can do. Validate the discomfort of not knowing. That's really important, right? It doesn't feel good to not know. It doesn't feel good to be in that space. So validate that. Foster a growth mindset, which means, hey, I don't know what's headed down the pipeline, and I'm confident we're going to deal with this as a challenge. It's not a barrier, it's a challenge for us. And maybe not even it's a challenge, it's an opportunity for us. Research shows if we reframe some of those pieces and we say it's not a threat, it's a challenge, it's not even a challenge, it's an opportunity, we are more likely to get through that. And all we've done is decide how to think about it. And what Rebecca is saying here too, there's so much healing in just naming things. Name it. This is an opportunity, right? And so we foster this growth mindset to say, yeah, maybe we don't know how it's going to work, and I'm confident we're going to figure this out, right? Growth. How do we learn from this? Discuss priorities, let go of perfectionism. What is okay to be good enough? Or what are some of those things that, you know what, in all the things we're balancing, compounding stressors and all those things we're balancing, let's take this one away. We don't need to worry about this one right now, right? We can table that while we work on some other pieces. That's really helpful, right? When we're thinking about all the things we're holding on to, if I can take one or two away, then I feel like I can focus more on these ones. I just mentioned this one, but thinking of challenges as opportunities. And then again, goes right back to this one again of respecting and encouraging those boundaries and self-preservation in yourself and in other people. And then lastly, as we lead through stress and burnout, the biggest thing is that we recognize those signs and symptoms. So pay attention, look at some of those signs, take that survey. Like I said, nobody sees it, but look at what's on there. And then ask yourself, am I feeling any of this? Are my colleagues feeling any of this? Is my team feeling any of this? And how do we talk about that as a group? I want to really, really emphasize that that requires trust. And so to build trust in that team is also very, very important in order to have some of these conversations. I'm going to keep saying this one, encourage those self-preservation strategies. Display and foster empathy, which means I understand where you're coming from and I'm willing to feel what you're feeling. Even if I might not have felt that before, I'm willing to try. Think flexibly and positively without diminishing the reality of stress. And I think this is one of the other kind of most important things I can talk about. When we are experiencing stress, what tends to happen anthropologically in our brain is we start to categorize things. Things are good, things are bad, things are black, things are white. And we categorize, right? What starts to happen is when we are stressed, we start to lose creativity and complexity of a situation. So if we can shift out of that and remember to think flexibly and positively, this is really important. And it's not a toxic positivity mindset, which toxic positivity would mean that I only want to think about the positive. I don't want to think about the negative at all. It's an and. So how do I elevate both of those experiences? Let's talk about the stress. Let's acknowledge and validate and empathize the hard that we are going through. And let's focus on some of the positives that we can do. Let's focus on the momentum. Let's focus on, the things that bring us that passion. It's an and conversation, and I just can't emphasize that enough. Because if we've shoved down the hard, I don't want to talk about the hard. I don't want to talk about the negative. I only want to talk about what's going well. We invalidate a very, very real experience for us. And so let's lift it both up and let's talk about both. Whew. That's the end of what I wanted to kind of talk about today. But I want to invite just a little bit more dialogue and we can continue. But I want to ask you, and I encourage you to kind of reflect on that. Based on what I talked about, maybe nothing, but maybe what changes do you hope to make? Maybe that's for yourself, maybe that's for your organization or your community, but what is one thing you want to shift towards? And as you think about that, here's a couple of resources for you. Our website, resilience.uccs.edu, will tell you all the sorts of great things that we do in our community. Grit.uccs.edu is a completely free online program that teaches anybody and everybody how to help or how to have just a helpful conversation with someone who's experiencing stress. So, what are some key factors? What are some strategies? What are some ways that you can really foster strength in somebody else during a conversation? And then myresiliencehelp.com, another free resource. This is an online self-help tool. If you've ever gone through stress or you're experiencing post-trauma, this helps you work through several different modules and gives you some different tools for success for that. And then there's my email. So once again, I just want to invite any dialogue, any conversation around what might you shift, or what are you hoping to, or what have you hopefully taken away from this conversation. And then I'll also pass this back to Rebecca when you're ready as well. I'm gonna take a chug of water.
Yeah, that was a lot. And so, so good. Yeah, I'd love to hear from someone if you want to come off mute or turn on your camera or drop in the chat. Because it's so important as you take in all this information. What is the one thing, one small thing that you are going to bring back to preserve? I loved that, Nicole, self-preservation, to preserve yourself as a leader and a business owner, as a family member. Does anyone have a takeaway they're willing to share?
This is always that awkward part of online meetings where we just stare at ourselves.
Yeah.
Perfect. There's somebody good with right hand raised. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead,
Hi.
Heidi.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's me. Sorry, I didn't realize I didn't have my name on there. In other platforms I do. Yeah, I think I'm going to make an outline of everything that you said. It was so good. It was so good. Because I am a leader of a nonprofit and I'm doing all the work. And I'm like, we could pay someone to do this, like writing grants. I'm just starting to get it. I don't know how to write a grant, but I will learn. And I'm getting into it and I like doing it. But this is something that we can pay someone for. And just valuing myself has been like the theme of the last 2 to 3 weeks. I'm also working on my own business, but I wanted to like make an outline checklist of the things that you say. One, to like put a checklist on my board at home on my wall. I put post-it notes behind my computer at my desk. And so I'm going to be like, protect others, but focus on myself instead. Like, where is that boundary? And I can protect others by being a good leader and setting those boundaries. Because right now, like when I get an idea, I just like blast it to the group, like, hey, I got this idea. But I don't want to be open 24/7. I don't want them to, they are, because it is Black Breastfeeding Week and we are, sorry, I have screaming babies too. Move for a sec. So all of our posts have been promoting Black Breastfeeding Week and not promoting ourselves and our funding. And people have been posting ideas at 9, 10 p.m. at night. So I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to be like, my business hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7, 6, dinner time, I'm done. And so I'm going to like make those hours and then hopefully everyone else will follow suit. And instead of texting people individually, we have a WhatsApp. So if I have an idea, I can either put it in the WhatsApp, the appropriate group, or I just get a list going because we share a Google Drive. So I will just dump my ideas in there. I liked show empathy, name it as it helps, flexible, positive. So you just gave me a lot of good ideas. Family comes first, like I'm doing this for free. and I'm
Mhm.
getting so tired and I'm getting so burnt out. So
Absolutely.
yeah, the boundaries is the one that's really hitting home on me, and putting one of my mentors said, well, like, we're birth doulas. So when you go to a birth, how much time do you spend?
Mm-hmm.
We are spending at least 10 hours, but up to, this one lady was at a birth for 36 hours. And I'm like, why? Now, she did, like, they fed her breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She didn't have anything better to do, because she doesn't have her own business going. She slept when they slept. But my mentor was like, how many hours, put a time, a price, put a limit,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I was like, labor laws, 12 hours, even though we're volunteers, every 5 hours, you have to take a break.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, we started running before we had the foundation, before we were walking. So everyone is just like, oh, I just love doing this, my heart. And I'm like, no, like, we're working on SOPs, protocols. You're only going to be at a birth 12 hours, and then you have to go home, take a break. I don't even care, like, if you actually go home or not, but you have to leave the room. You have to set the standard that, no, I am not volunteering my time 24/7 to be with you.
Yep.
So yeah, you gave me a lot of ideas, and I'm going to start implementing them. So
Well,
thank you
good.
Yeah.
I'm
very
so
much.
glad.
I really enjoyed this.
And
Good. I'm so glad.
it's possible to start small. Pick one is always a great idea. Brandon, you had your hand raised too.
Yes, we're going to run out of time in just a moment, but something that you said 254286 is that you're going to
Heidi.
control some things. And
Yeah.
so, what I want you to do is just think about that statement, control what you can control.
Mm,
Because setting a checklist in your board or being intentional about your time and how you spend it, those are things you can control. But worrying
mm,
about what happened in the past or what you got coming up, those are things that are going to just get you all wound up. And I
mhm,
also will mention, whether you believe in it or not, AI is a really great way to create some efficiencies. So we have a big AI summit coming up at the SBDC on September 22nd. So maybe come check out how AI can create some efficiencies so that 10-hour mark can maybe get down to 40 or 50% of that by using some technology. Um,
mhm.
I know we're at time, so Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you to wrap it up. But Nicole, this was great. You always have great pearls of wisdom, just very insightful human, and we always appreciate what the Lyda Hill Institute is doing over there at UCCS.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
100%. Yeah, I'm going to take over sharing really quick. I'm just going to close
Oh,
with this slide. Just so you all know too, the next workshop's coming up. If you want to register for September or October, September is going to go a little bit more into the nervous system regulation piece of managing your capacity. We hear a lot about what nervous system regulation, but what does that actually mean? How do I actually build my own tolerance and my ability to move between stress states, as Nicole described? And so we have a trauma coach coming in to talk about that. And then I'll be talking about in October just the social impact, why this matters so much, this idea of how I have a ripple effect, and some ways to really create a workplace where humans can thrive so that our community can thrive. We're so grateful that you all could come today to the workshop. We are recording this. I send the link, I post it to my YouTube and send it the link to Brandon who can share it out. And if you are a nonprofit, I'm just going to drop my email in the chat because there's some free nonprofit resources available in our community, some quarterly gatherings that get our nonprofits together to solution and problem solve together that I attend and I'm aware of. And they're not mine, but I can share that resource with those of you who have nonprofits as well. But yeah, there was a lot to pack in. Nicole, you are always a fount of wisdom and expertise in this area. We're so grateful for you and for this content. And feel free to reach out to the SBDC. Also, if you just want an hour to talk this through with me as a consultant for the SBDC, that's a free service that the SBDC does offer you. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Do one small thing and do it with self-compassion. No shoulds or shames. Just take care of yourself. We care about you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.